What would you do if the island you thought would save you was the very place meant to claim your soul? When Will and his friends set sail to explore the mysterious island of Chirat B, they expected adventure, not a centuries-old curse rooted in blood, sacrifice, and something older than man. What they found was a nightmare hidden beneath the waves, a truth twisted by time, and a choice no one should ever have to make. Some islands don't want you to leave, and some secrets refuse to stay buried. They told us the island wasn't on any map for a reason, but by the time we understood why, it was far too late to turn back. Will sat stiffly in the back of the Jeep, watching the jungle recede in the rearview mirror as their convoy made its way toward the docks. The dirt road was narrow, flanked by dense walls of palm and acacia trees, their twisted limbs clawing at the vehicle windows. It was only 6:30 a.m., but the sun already burned high above the humid horizon, making everything shimmer with a golden haze. It should have felt like paradise, yet every instinct in Will's body screamed otherwise. Charlie, always the enthusiast, leaned forward from the middle seat. "You guys ready for this? No Wi-Fi, no signal, just raw, untouched nature and ancient legends. I'm stoked." Robert, sitting shotgun, glanced over his shoulder with a smirk. "You mean you're ready for your travel blog to finally blow up? Just don't get eaten by a crab the size of your ego." Charlie laughed. "Come on, man. It's not every day you get invited to a restricted island no one's been allowed to set foot on for decades." Marcy rolled her eyes but smiled. "As long as we don't run into ghost cannibals or something, I'll take the risk." Will didn't say anything. He watched as the trees gave way to the coastline. In the distance, their boat waited, a weathered motor vessel bobbing gently near a rickety dock. A figure stood beside it, tall, dark-skinned, and motionless as a statue. Abdul, the local guide. He was the one who'd approached them back in Jakarta. He claimed to know of a place, an island, only mentioned in hushed whispers among fishermen. Jarrat B, he called it, an island shrouded in superstition, forbidden by the elders of his village, and he'd offered to take them there. "You ever been to the island yourself?" Will had asked Abdel 2 nights ago, after a few rounds of bintang at the hotel bar. The man had stared into his glass a long moment before answering. "Once, when I was a boy, I lost something there." The group gathered their gear at the dock: waterproof packs, a satellite radio, notebooks, cameras, a couple of GoPros strapped to shoulder rigs. Will's fingers lingered on the worn leather journal in his bag. His late uncle's, the one filled with erratic entries about the B region and wrong water. No one else knew about the journal. "All right," Abdul said as he started the motor. 3 hours by boat. Stay in your seats. Don't look too long into the water." Marcy raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to scare us?" Abdul didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. The engine roared as they cut through the sea. At first, the ocean was postcard perfect. Turquoise waves, glimmering fish, salt in the air. But the longer they traveled, the darker the water grew. It turned a deep, viscous blue, almost black. The air thickened. Even the sun seemed to dim as clouds gathered unnaturally fast above. Charlie was the first to notice. "Hey, is it just me, or does the compass keep spinning?" Robert frowned, holding his phone. "Yeah, mine too. GPS just froze." Marcy squinted toward the front. "Land?" A jagged silhouette emerged from the mist, not large but sharp and imposing. Craggy cliffs ringed its edges, like the broken teeth of a drowned beast. A narrow beach jutted forward like a tongue, flanked by what looked like twisted ruins swallowed by vines and moss. Jarabi, they disembarked into ankle-deep water, dragging their packs onto the sand. The island smelled of rot and iron, not the crisp, salty scent they expected, more like something that had been buried and recently unearthed. "Camp should be inland," Abdul said, voice low. "There's an old trail through the palms." As they entered the brush, Will noticed the shift immediately. No birds, no insects, not even wind, only silence, the kind that pressed against your skin and made every breath feel invasive. An hour into their trek, they found it. A clearing with crumbled stone platforms and carved totems wrapped in rotted cloth. Faces chiseled into the rocks stared down at them with vacant sockets, mouths frozen in silent screams. "What the hell is this place?" Charlie whispered. Abdul was silent. Then, "Shrine. To the old ones. You shouldn't speak loudly here." Robert scoffed, but unease flickered in his eyes. "Looks like a set from The Descent." Will wandered to one of the totems. His fingers brushed its surface, rough with age and wet. He jerked back. His hand came away stained with something black and slick, like oil, but it smelled like copper, like blood. As they set up camp near the shrine, Will pulled out the journal. The pages were warped from moisture, but one entry stood out. "Don't follow the drumming. It's never really thunder." Thunder rolled suddenly through the clouds above, though the sky remained still. Will snapped the journal shut. That night, as Will lay in his tent listening to the strange silence, he heard it, faint, rhythmic, echoing from deep within the jungle. Boom, boom, boom. Not thunder, drums. Just like the journal warned. The breeze that had once rustled through the jungle canopy now stilled, like even the wind had fled this cursed island. Will followed the dirt path carved through the lush greenery, boots crunching over broken shells and bone-dry leaves. Behind him, the others trailed in tense silence. Charlie fidgeting with his camera lens, Marcy scribbling notes into her soggy journal, Liv scanning the trees like she expected something to leap from the shadows. Only Robert remained completely unbothered, sipping from a dented flask and humming some old Creedence Clearwater Revival tune. "Are we sure this is even a path?" Marcy finally asked, dodging a low-hanging vine. "No," Will replied. "But it's in the right direction. Abdul said the village ruins are west of the cliffs. We're going west." Charlie muttered, "You trust that guy way too much. I mean, who the hell gets shipwrecked twice and decides to become a tour guide?" Will stopped, turning back to face them. "You want to go back?" Charlie looked at the dense canopy behind them, then at the crude map Abdul had drawn in his notebook. "Didn't say that." "Then quit whining." They continued on until the path abruptly ended at a clearing. What lay before them stopped them cold. A circle of stone totems, about 10 feet tall, blackened as though from fire or age, stood in eerie symmetry around a central pit. The pit itself was filled with bones, not just animal, but unmistakably human. Jawbones, femurs, and at least one skull with what looked like ritual carvings scorched into the forehead. "What in God's name?" Liv whispered. Marcy was already photographing the scene. "This isn't just some forgotten camp. This is ceremonial." Will approached one of the totems, noticing the crude humanoid form. Long limbs, narrow torso, a gaping toothless mouth at the center of its head. Moss clung to its shoulders like rotting flesh. Beneath it, something was etched into the stone. "Help me clear this," he said, motioning to Charlie. Together they brushed away the moss, revealing a sequence of symbols, spirals, triangles with lines through them, and a central motif, a figure kneeling beneath a spiked crown. "Looks like writing," Marcy said, "but it's not Polynesian. Not any script I've ever seen." Robert gave a low whistle. "This shit straight up cult stuff." Will's voice dropped. "Abdul said the villagers worship something they called He Who Dwells Below. Maybe this is how they summoned it." Charlie snorted. "And then what? Hugged it? Sacrificed goats?" "No." Will's eyes were fixed on the skulls. "Worse." As if on cue, the jungle darkened. It wasn't clouds. It was as if something had drained the light itself. A distant, bone-deep rumble shook the ground, like the groan of a sleeping leviathan rolling in its slumber. Charlie stumbled backward. "Did anyone hear that?" "We all did," Liv said, eyes wide. Will crouched near the pit and pulled out the small stone amulet Abdul had given him earlier. It was warm now. Too warm. Then Marcy screamed. They turned to see her backing away from one of the totems, her hand covered in blood. It moved! I swear to God, it moved!" Will rushed over. The totem was still in place. Charlie stepped forward to check. She probably cut herself. But then he stopped talking. Because now, clearly carved into the stone, was a fresh handprint in blood. Still dripping. "What the hell?" Charlie whispered. "We need to go," Liv said. "Right now." "No," Will said. "Not yet. This place. It's a piece of the puzzle. We need to document it, then we leave." "Document it?" Robert scoffed. "What is this, National Geographic Satanic Edition?" But Marcy was already snapping photos with shaky hands. Will drew the symbols into his notebook. Behind them, a whisper stirred the trees, a voice like wet leaves scraping together. Something ancient, something angry. Then came the footprints. Damp impressions appearing in the moss, walking toward them. No body, no figure, just the weight of something invisible, pacing around the group like a predator considering its prey. Charlie let out a strangled sound. "Screw this, I'm out." He turned and bolted into the jungle. "Charlie, no!" Marcy called, but he was gone, swallowed by the foliage. Will cursed and followed. They found Charlie 2 minutes later, standing in front of a decaying wooden post. His camera lay shattered on the ground. He was staring at a small wooden idol nailed to the post. It looked like the totem's, only smaller, and it had his face carved crudely into it. Beneath it, someone had etched, "The first to trespass shall feed the root." "Charlie," Will said carefully, "step away." But Charlie didn't move. His lips were trembling. "That's my shirt. That's the shirt I wore when we landed." Will realized with horror that the tiny figure had a scrap of Charlie's actual shirt tied around its wooden torso. It hadn't been there before. That was when Charlie's nose started bleeding, then his eyes. Then he dropped to his knees, convulsing. Liv screamed. Marcy turned to run, but Will caught her. "We don't leave him," he shouted, but it was too late. The ground beneath Charlie split open, not like an earthquake, but like a mouth parting from within the earth. Vines, thin, black, and slick with ooze, shot out, wrapping around Charlie's legs, dragging him screaming into the opening. Will dove forward, grabbing for his hand, but a vine whipped across his chest, flinging him back. Then the hole snapped shut. Gone. No trace, no blood, no broken earth, only silence. The group stood frozen in horror. Then Marcy whispered, "We have to go. This island, it doesn't want us here." Will stood, bruised and shaken. He stared at the post where the idol had been. It was gone, but in its place, nailed to the wood, was something else. A photo. Will stepped closer. It was a picture of him, standing in the same clearing, taken from behind, but the timestamp in the corner read 3 hours from now. They buried Charlie with their silence, not under dirt or stone, but beneath the weight of what none of them dared to say aloud. Will sat at the edge of the clearing, his arms wrapped tightly around his knees, staring into the place where the earth had swallowed his friend. The jungle buzzed with life, yet the clearing remained unnaturally still. No birds, no insects, just the faint metallic scent of blood that no one wanted to acknowledge. Behind him, the others packed their gear in near total silence. "We can't stay," Marcy said at last. Her voice cracked. "We need to go back. Signal the boat. Tell Abdul we're done." "There's no boat," Liv whispered. "What do you mean?" "I checked the satellite phone. It's dead. And there's no signal out here." Will didn't move. "We keep going," Robert scoffed. "You've lost it, man. One of us is dead, dragged underground by whatever the hell that thing was, and your idea is to keep going." Will turned. His face was pale, gaunt in the morning light, but his eyes burned with a quiet, unrelenting determination. "You saw the photo. Someone, or something, knows we're here. We're not just trespassers. We're part of it now. The island. It marked us." Marcy folded her arms. "And what, we play along? Follow the trail deeper? Let it take us one by one?" "No," Will said. We understand it, we find out what it wants, and maybe, just maybe, we find a way off this goddamn island. Liv looked at him with pity. You think this is about knowledge? About answers? Will? This is punishment. Still, none of them moved to leave. They set off north, following the shallow creek Marcy had spotted earlier. The jungle changed around them. Trees grew closer together. The air became thicker, damp with the smell of mildew and something else, coppery, like rusting metal or old blood. Soon they found the second ruin. It was half buried in vines and moss, a crumbling stone building, its roof collapsed inward, but its entrance still intact, framed by twisted effigies of human-animal hybrids. One had the head of a goat and the body of a child. Another bore a twisted human torso, but walked on bird-like talons. Will approached cautiously, drawing his flashlight. Over the arched entrance was a carving. Blood is the seed, flesh is the fruit. What the hell does that mean? Robert muttered. Will ran his fingers over the inscription. It's part of a ritual, blood offering maybe, something agricultural but reversed. Not crops that feed people, people that feed something else. Okay, I'm done, Robert said. We're going in? Yes, Will said simply. The inside was worse than expected. The building had once been a temple. At the far end stood a cracked obsidian altar, slick with moss. The floor was covered in etched grooves, channels almost, leading from the entrance to the altar itself, a drainage system, meant for blood. Above the altar, a crude mural had survived the years. It showed figures in rows, kneeling, arms raised. A great black shape towered over them, a creature with too many limbs, no face, and spirals for eyes. The same spirals from the totems, Marcy murmured. It's all connected. Suddenly, Will flinched. There was a whisper, soft, hissing. A voice that didn't come from the mouth, but from behind the ears, deep in the skull. He watches through the root. Will turned, but no one else seemed to hear it. What is it? Liv asked, concerned. He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt near the altar and retrieved a small object buried in the dirt. A token made of bone, carved into the shape of a tree whose roots formed a human ribcage. On the back, the same phrase, "He who dwells below." We need to document this, Marcy said, already photographing the mural. But as she raised the camera, the lens cracked, not from pressure, but as though something had struck it from the inside. Will pulled her back. Let's get out of here. They exited into the fading daylight, only to find the jungle changed. The path they'd taken was gone. Trees had shifted, branches twisted in unnatural arcs. The creek bed was dry. No, Liv said, stepping forward. This isn't possible. It's a trick, Robert growled. The island's playing with us. Will turned toward the west. That way, the lights fading. There's a clearing up ahead. They made camp that night beneath the ruined canopy of what had once been a colonial outpost, long abandoned. The buildings were skeletal, weather-beaten walls, collapsed roofs, windows empty of glass. Marcy lit a small fire using waterproof matches. Liv curled up near the embers, silent. Robert cleaned his knife for the 10th time, muttering to himself. Will sat apart from the others, staring at the carved token. Then, from the shadows behind the broken wall, he heard it again. That whisper. He watches. He rose slowly. From the tree line, something watched them. A figure half concealed, tall and wrong-shaped, with limbs that bent the wrong way. No face, no voice, just presence. It didn't move, didn't approach, just watched. Will blinked, and it was gone. He didn't tell the others. But that night, as they tried to sleep, something scratched lightly at the outer wall, like roots dragging slowly over wood. The attic air was sharp with mildew and dust, and every step Will took on the old wooden planks felt like trespassing into a part of the house meant to be forgotten. He reached the far end of the attic where the panel had fallen. Just beyond the exposed boards, a narrow crawl space loomed, like an open throat. Will knelt down, directing his flashlight inside. He found a crate covered in dust, sealed tight with thick rope and, curiously, wax along the edges, like someone had tried to sanctify it. His breath caught in his chest. He tugged the crate out, brushing the top with his sleeve. Property of Reverend Carter, 1871. The label read in faded ink, Reverend Carter. The same name on the map and the ranger station. Hands shaking, Will broke the wax and unfastened the ropes. The crate creaked as it opened. Inside, among moth-eaten cloths and old books, lay a collection of strange items. A tarnished brass bell, pages torn from handwritten journals, and a wooden mask, carved with what looked like deer antlers but human-like eyes. He picked up the journal. They brought her to the island. She was not meant to speak, only to dream. But the dreams bled into flesh, and the flesh birthed the first kin. We sealed the place with salt, bell, and binding. It must never be broken. Pages after that were stuck together with something that looked and smelled like dried blood. Will backed away. His mind raced. Who was she? What dreams? He glanced again at the map. The drawing of the eastern cave had a symbol, a bell inside a circle of salt. Below the journal, he found another item wrapped in black cloth. He unwrapped it slowly. A photograph. Black and white, faded. A group of people, maybe 30, standing in a line, all wearing the same wooden mask with antlers. His fingers went cold. He flipped it over. Communion, September 3rd, 1892. Jared B. Suddenly, footsteps thudded above him, or rather, inside the attic walls. Will's head jerked up. He wasn't alone. "Hello?" His voice cracked. The footsteps stopped. Then a scraping. Something was moving between the inner walls. Slow, deliberate. It paused directly behind him. Will turned to bolt, but his flashlight flickered. In the dimness, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was short, hunched, covered in hair or seaweed, hard to tell, a face hidden behind a mask. The same mask in the photograph. Will froze. The masked figure raised its hand. Long, gnarled fingers ending in nails like bone splinters. It pointed at the crate. Then it spoke, not with words, but through Will's own voice, twisting it. "She dreams again. You brought her bread." Will stumbled back, knocking over a shelf. The figure vanished in a blink, like it was never there. He rushed downstairs, the journal in hand. His head pounded. He didn't stop until he was outside, on the front porch, gasping for clean air. But it was dusk now. The island had turned gray, washed in pale blue shadows. He scanned the trees. Nothing. He needed to talk to someone. Abdul, maybe even Charlie. Someone to verify he wasn't losing it. But just as he reached into his pocket, he noticed something strange. The journal was warm, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat, and on the back cover, letters were appearing, etched by some invisible hand. Jarrett's flesh never left. It only waited. Will flipped the final page of the journal, and inside was a sketch, drawn in childish pencil, of a figure sleeping in the cave, surrounded by bones. But at the bottom, a scrawl read, "Don't wake her. If she sees you, she'll wear your skin." Just then, his satellite phone rang. It was Abdul. Only the voice on the other end wasn't Abdul. It whispered, "You're late for the communion." It wasn't the island that changed. It was Will's reflection, staring back at him with someone else's eyes. The next morning, the world felt quieter, too quiet. The waves had stilled to a sheet of glass around the island, and not a single bird dared to sing. Will sat alone on the cabin's porch, the journal open in his lap, the photograph tucked into the back cover like a warning. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the figure in the attic, its wooden mask gleaming, lips unmoving as his own voice whispered back at him. He knew he had to return to the others. This wasn't something he could carry alone. Packing the journal, the photo, and the bell from the crate into his bag, Will took the main trail back toward the central camp. The morning fog clung to the trees like smoke, curling through the underbrush, whispering across his path. A chill settled in his bones, despite the rising sun. By the time he reached the campfire ring, Robert and Charlie were already awake. Robert was half-dressed, dragging logs toward a new pile of firewood. Charlie sat cross-legged with a can of beans, looking as if he hadn't slept either. "Where the hell did you go last night?" Robert's voice was hoarse with tension. "Liv said you just vanished after sundown." Will dropped his bag with a soft thump. "I found something," he said. "In the attic? At that old house near the eastern ridge. It belonged to someone named Reverend Carter." Charlie looked up sharply. "The same Carter from that weird plaque in the chapel ruins," Will nodded. "It's all connected. Look." He unfolded the journal and handed it over. Robert scanned the pages with a frown. "This looks like some kind of religious log," he muttered, "but it reads more like an exorcism manual. Salt, bell, and binding? What the hell kind of place did we land on?" Will turned to Charlie. "That cave on the map, where the drawing of the bell is. Do you remember where it was?" Charlie nodded slowly. "Just past the northern cove. We were gonna check it out today, remember? You think it's related to this communion thing?" "I think everything's related now," Will replied. Just then, a scream tore through the woods. They froze. It was Marcy. Without a word, all three of them sprinted toward the sound. The trail led them into dense brush, branches clawing at their clothes as they crashed through the thicket. At the edge of a shallow ravine, they found Liv kneeling beside Marcy, who sat slumped against a tree, her arms scratched, shirt torn, face pale as ash. "Something chased us," Liv gasped. "We were looking for the northern trailhead and it came out of the trees. No sound, no warning, just this shape." "Did it touch you?" Will asked, helping Marcy up. "No," she whispered, "but it mimicked you." "Will, it looked like you." Will's stomach turned. Robert pulled out a hunting knife from his boot. "That's it. I don't care if this is some prank or what. We find that cave, we find what's making this happen, and we end it." Will looked around. The forest had grown still again, unnaturally still. Seen, approaching the communion cave. The hike to the northern cove took over an hour. The terrain grew rough, rockier, with old trees leaning at odd angles, as if repelled by something buried beneath them. At the base of a cliff, the cave mouth yawned open like a gash in the earth, ringed with rust-colored moss. The group hesitated. "Anyone else feel that?" Robert muttered. Will nodded. The air vibrated slightly, like the hum of electricity. A feeling deep in his gut told him this was a place that didn't welcome visitors. He stepped forward anyway. Inside, the walls were damp and uneven, carved with ancient symbols, scratched into the stone, some glowing faintly in the dark. The deeper they went, the colder it became, until their breath fogged the air. At the far end, they found the altar. It was crude. Stone slabs arranged in a spiral, bone fragments scattered around it, and in the center, a figure etched into the rock wall. A woman, faceless, arms outstretched, hair flowing into tendrils that reached the ceiling. Will's breath caught. "She dreams again," he murmured. The words from the attic echoed in his skull. Behind them, Marcy suddenly doubled over, groaning. Her eyes rolled back and a guttural voice escaped her lips. Not her own. "Bell. Salt. Silence is broken. Flesh calls to flesh." The cave trembled, rocks shifted, and from the shadows behind the altar, something began to rise. Will felt his breath shorten as the narrow passage of the cavern opened into a dome-shaped hollow, the ceiling so high it disappeared into the dark. His torch flickered against jagged rock streaked with reddish residue, iron or something worse. The symbols carved into the stone had become more complex, spiraling out in angular, almost obsessive patterns. Liv gasped softly beside him, her hand instinctively brushing his arm. "This place, it's not natural," she whispered. "I don't think it's meant to be," Will replied. At the center of the chamber stood a stone dais surrounded by scattered bones and faded wax drippings. Something had been performed here, over and over. At the base of the dais, a rusted chain was half buried in ash. Abdul remained silent, eyes fixed on a crudely painted symbol behind the altar. It resembled an eye, but broken, bisected by jagged lines. "That's the mark of Kalzurath," Abdul finally spoke. His voice trembled. "I saw it once in an old journal. A deity of binding, sacrifice, and evolution." Will's throat tightened. Evolution? Abdul nodded. Their belief wasn't that people were punished, but upgraded. Transformed into something pure, closer to Kalzurath. Robert's voice echoed faintly from the passageway. "You guys seeing this freak show?" They turned to see him entering with Charlie limping behind, his ankle twisted from earlier. "We followed the trail of carvings, found a tunnel that bypassed the main cave. This place is a goddamn tomb," Robert added. Marcy stepped forward, brushing away dust from a slab near the dais. Beneath the grime were 3 names etched into stone, along with dates from the early 1900s. Will crouched, reading aloud. "Judith Barker, Elias Jarre, and Lucien Wren." His voice cracked. "The founder of the island settlement." "That's impossible," Liv murmured. "These people, they were supposed to have left the island after the collapse." Abdul shook his head. "No one left. They became part of the ritual. I think that's what the villagers tried to hide." Suddenly, a deep vibration trembled through the floor beneath them. Distant, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, the torches hissed. Will instinctively turned toward the tunnel, now plunged into shadow. A gust of wind howled through the chamber, extinguishing all but one flame. "Back up," Robert shouted. "Something's coming." A silhouette moved within the darkness, tall, inhuman, not walking but gliding. Its form shimmered like liquid stone, face smeared with twisted features that constantly morphed. "Don't run," Abdul said hoarsely. "It reacts to fear," but it was too late. Charlie, unable to stand the tension, screamed and bolted toward the tunnel. As soon as he crossed the threshold, the shadow vanished, and a sound like bone snapping echoed through the chamber. Robert ran after him, only to return seconds later, white-faced, shaking his head. "He's gone! It took him!" Panic surged. Liv clutched Will's arm. "We have to leave." "No!" Abdul said, louder now. "We have to finish this, or it will pick us off, one by one." He pointed to the eye symbol. "This isn't a curse, it's a covenant. Someone offered the island and themselves. The question is who still upholds the deal." Will stepped toward the altar, brushing away more ash to reveal a 4th name. Randall. His breath caught. "That's my uncle's name." Abdul's eyes widened. "Randall Harlow, the last surviving bloodline. That's why the entity's not attacking you." Marcy gasped. "It's not just a coincidence you came here. This place called you." Will staggered back, memories slamming into him. The old journal his uncle kept hidden, the strange birthmark on his shoulder, his chronic dreams of the ocean whispering his name. "Then what does it want?" he whispered. The torches flared suddenly as the wind circled inward, forming a vortex of dust and smoke. From within it came a voice, not loud, but undeniable. "Bring me the rest." Will dreamed of drowning, but not in water, in blood, thick and warm, rising around his chest as disembodied hands dragged him deeper into a crimson abyss. Will awoke, gasping, back slick with sweat despite the cave's chilling damp. The fire had long since died, and the others were still sleeping, or at least pretending to. He sat up slowly, still hearing the whisper. "Bring me the rest." The memory of the eye pulsing in unison with his heartbeat had not left him, nor had the name he uncovered on the altar. Randall. His uncle. His family. He pulled the small leather-bound journal from his backpack, the one he'd almost left behind in the van. Its pages were warped, scribbled in his uncle's cryptic handwriting. He flipped through it, searching for something, anything that might explain the connection. On page 43, underlined in faded ink, "The sacrifice must always come from the bloodline. Only those born of the island may bear the burden and seal the cycle." His mouth went dry. "Liv," he he whispered, nudging her gently. "Wake up." She stirred, bleary-eyed. "What is it?" "I think I know what it wants. Why it hasn't killed me yet." Robert, half dozing nearby, lifted his head. "You mean besides us being stuck on a haunted island with some shape-shifting demon thing?" Will stood, waving the journal. "I think I'm related to the ones who started all this. This isn't random." Marcy joined, eyes wide with concern. "Your uncle? Randall. He brought people here, didn't he?" "He did more than that," Will said. "He was the last one chosen. Whatever's haunting this island, it thinks I'm next in line." Abdul, already awake and listening, nodded slowly. "Then the entity is waiting. The ritual wasn't broken, it was paused. You coming here may have resumed it." The realization hit everyone like a cold slap. The group sat in silence for a long moment. Then Robert said what none of them wanted to admit. To it, "So, what now? We give it what it wants?" "You?" "No," Will said firmly. "I'm not going to be its next pawn, but maybe I can end it." They left the cave just before sunrise, following the crude sketches in Randall's journal toward the western cliffs. There, it claimed, stood the remnants of an offering site, an altar older than the settlement itself. As they hiked through the forest, the landscape grew more twisted, trees bent in unnatural ways, bark peeled in patterns like flayed skin, and always the faint hum beneath their feet, as if the island itself were vibrating. Marcy spotted the structure first, a circle of blackened stones half swallowed by moss and age. At its center stood a crude monolith shaped like a jagged tooth pointing skyward. Deep grooves ran down its face, now filled with rainwater and dried blood. Abdul stepped forward reverently. "The Pillar of Devouring." Will frowned. "That's not in the journal?" "It wouldn't be," Abdul replied. "This is the part they erased, the original ritual, before it was tamed into offerings of animals or trinkets. This was when they gave flesh, willingly." He knelt, brushing aside leaves to reveal bones, human femurs and jawbones buried in a shallow grave. Robert cursed under his breath. "We're standing on a goddamn mass grave." "No," Abdul said. "We're standing at the heart of the island. The pulse you felt, it comes from here." Will moved closer. The stone radiated heat as if pulsing with its own breath. His vision shimmered and then flickered. For a moment, the trees disappeared. The sky turned black. Around him were hooded figures chanting in tongues older than English. At the altar, a woman screamed, not in pain, but in ecstasy. He blinked, and the world snapped back. "I saw them," he whispered, "the ones who started this." "You saw through time," Abdul said. "The island is thinning. Your blood unlocks the veil." Will stepped back, horrified. "Then we need to close it. Seal it again." Abdul looked at the journal. "It says there's one way. Reverse the offering. Not to give, but to take back." Robert scoffed. "Take back what? People have been dead for centuries?" "No," Abdul corrected. "Not people. Power. The energy stored in this land, we might be able to bind it, turn it against the entity." "That's insane," Marcy said. "How do we even do that?" Will turned the page. There, in fresh ink, something he didn't remember writing, were 5 words: "Take them to the well." Will stood in stunned silence, the thick heat of the chamber pressing down on his skin like a second layer of flesh. Before him, the grotesque murals on the stone walls shimmered and shifted under torchlight. Eyes that blinked, mouths that silently screamed. Robert's blood had already begun to seep between the ancient grooves on the floor, trickling toward the shallow basin etched into the center of the ritual circle. Liv screamed behind him. "He's not dead! He's breathing!" But Abdul didn't turn. His face was pale, with an expression Will had never seen on him before. True, unfiltered dread. "He's not supposed to be alive," Abdul murmured. "It's not complete." "What do you mean?" Will snapped. "You said this place was used for rituals, sacrifices. What the hell are they trying to bring back?" Abdul didn't answer. Instead, he took a slow step backward toward the wall, eyes still fixed on Robert's body. Then the flickering torches around the chamber began to die, one by one, as if some invisible presence had begun to inhale all the oxygen in the air. Liv reached Will's side, clutching his arm. "We need to go, now!" The walls pulsed. Will was certain of it. Not just a flicker of torchlight, but an actual movement, as if the stone itself was alive. A deep hum vibrated from the floor, low and rhythmic, like a monstrous heartbeat. Suddenly, Robert's body arched up with a violent convulsion. His mouth gaped open, and from it came not a scream, but a voice. Low, distorted, ancient. Words they could not understand spilled out in a language that felt like it was being spoken directly into the back of Will's skull. Abdul dropped to his knees. "It's the tongue of the first, the elders. They're using him as a mouthpiece." The basin in the center of the floor flared to life with red light, casting warped shadows up the stone walls. The carvings seemed to ripple in response, aligning into a singular grotesque face, a horned thing, neither human nor beast, with dozens of small arms reaching outward. The voice spoke louder now, filling the chamber, and Will instinctively clamped his hands over his ears, but the words were inside them, inside their thoughts. "Taize o ma, o thrall, Vithkar." The stone beneath Robert cracked open like an egg, glowing from within. Whatever was beneath that floor, it was waking. "We have to stop it," Liv cried. "We can't just let it rise." But what could they do? Then, just as suddenly, the room went still. The torches flared back to life. Robert's body dropped limp to the floor, his mouth trailing a black mist that evaporated as it touched the air. For a moment, Will thought it was over, and then he saw Robert's eyes open, black, pupilless voids staring back at him. He stood. It wasn't Robert anymore. It smiled, and with an unholy hiss, it spoke his name. "William." Will backed away. "That's not him. That's not him." Abdul pulled something from his bag, an old frayed leather-bound book with jagged handwritten pages. "There's a counterwrite," he said. I didn't want to use it, but it may still be possible to banish the vessel." Liv moved quickly to help him flip the pages, eyes wide with disbelief as they passed pages of sigils, blood-stained diagrams, and frantic notes in 3 different languages. "Here," she said. "Page 63 to sever the mouthpiece." "What does it say?" Abdul read with shaking hands. 3 elements. Fire, pure flame, salt, coarse, unrefined, and blood of kin. Will blinked. "What?" But Liv was already turning to him, eyes wide. "It's you! Robert was your cousin!" "No." Will shook his head, stepping back. No, you're not doing that. We are not doing that." But the Robert thing lunged. The group scattered, screaming, as the vessel let out a howl of such force that the torches themselves shattered. Chunks of rock fell from the ceiling. Liv grabbed Will by the shirt and dragged him behind one of the collapsed stone pillars. "We don't have time," she shouted. "It's either you give a drop of your blood or that thing becomes permanent." Abdul was already drawing a circle on the floor with salt from a pouch he had buried deep in his satchel. "Now, Will!" With shaking fingers, Will unsheathed the hunting knife from his belt and made a shallow cut across his palm. Hissing at the pain, he dripped the blood onto the stone. Abdul chanted in a voice not entirely his own, perhaps something older speaking through him, just as it had through Robert. The salt circle blazed to life, fire sprouting from nothing. Liv stood at the edge, holding the flame from a torch stolen from the wall. The robber thing screamed and flailed, trying to push past the energy forming around it. Its body flickered like a bad signal, as though it no longer belonged entirely in this dimension. The chamber vibrated. Will fell to his knees, vision swimming, ears ringing. Then, a flash of light, a sound like cracking bones inside his own head, and silence. He opened his eyes to find the stone chamber blackened, scorched. The basin was dry, the sigils had faded. Robert's body lay still again, eyes closed. But before he could exhale in relief, a whisper brushed his ear, not from the chamber, from the back of his mind. You let me taste. Now I remember you. And next time, you'll let me in." Will screamed. Will couldn't remember if the blood on his hands was his, Robert's, or something else entirely. The morning after the ritual, the forest no longer felt like it belonged to the living. Will sat motionless beside a dying campfire outside the ruins, the embers flickering in the heavy fog that had rolled in overnight. His shirt was stiff with dried blood, and his mind, whatever fragments were still functioning, refused to rewind to the moment Robert's body turned to ash, because it hadn't. He'd seen it disappear. He'd felt the warmth of the banishment circle, but he could also still feel the whisper curled around his spine, like a shadow pressed against the inside of his skull. Something had entered him. He hadn't told Liv. She sat a few yards away, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes fixed on the tree line. Neither of them had spoken much since they escaped the underground chamber, dragging Abdul, nearly unconscious, out through the collapsed shaft. The map they'd found earlier, along with Abdul's notes, lay splayed between them, weighed down by a chunk of obsidian taken from the ritual altar. One spot was circled. Burial Site 3A, Forgotten Crypt. Will finally spoke. "We're not done." Will didn't respond. She turned to face him. "That thing, whatever it is, that ritual was meant to awaken it, but we interrupted it. It's still here. Maybe it's in you, I don't know, but we can't just leave this island and hope it disappears." Will looked at his palms. The cut from last night had already scabbed over, but it felt like it still bled. Internally. "I don't think we can leave," he said. Liv furrowed her brow. "What?" He pointed toward the water beyond the trees. "There's fog. Thick. I checked before sunrise. I couldn't see the boat or the shoreline. It's like the island won't let us go." From behind them, Abdul groaned. Will and Liv rushed to his side. The old guide's face was pale and clammy, sweat beading on his forehead. His eyes fluttered open and focused slowly. "We broke the seal," he said hoarsely, "but we didn't destroy it. That requires the original binding artifact, the Heartstone. We need to find it, or the next breach will be permanent." Liv held up the map. "Is that what's marked here? The crypt?" Abdul nodded weakly. "That's where the founders buried the source, after they trapped it. But no one's opened that place in over a century." Will helped Abdul sit up, but the old man winced in pain. "I can't go with you," he whispered. "You two. You're tied to it now. The island's watching you. It doesn't care about me." "What does that mean?" Will demanded. "It means," Abdul rasped, "you're not just visitors anymore." Liv shivered. An hour later, they packed what little gear they had and set out into the woods. The path to the crypt lay eastward, through what the old journal had called the Bone Forest, a stretch of warped trees that had grown around what used to be a colonial cemetery, abandoned after a fever wiped out the original settlers. As they walked, the woods grew unnaturally quiet. No birds, no wind. Even their footsteps on the mossy ground made no sound, as if the island were swallowing every vibration. Will paused beside a tree with strange markings carved into the bark. Liv brushed her fingers over them. "They're fresh. They look like claw marks," Will murmured. Further ahead, the air turned colder. The light dimmed even though it was past noon. A structure began to emerge. Partially collapsed stone pillars, worn stairs descending beneath twisted roots. They had found the crypt, and it was waiting. The entrance yawned like an open grave. Carved into the lintel stone above was a sigil Will recognized from Abdul's notes, a spiraled eye inside a 7-pointed star. It had been scratched through, violently, as though something had clawed its way out. Inside, the air reeked of rot and dust. Their flashlights barely penetrated the thick darkness. The stairs spiraled downward in uneven slabs, slick with moisture. 15 steps in, the temperature plummeted. Will's breath came out in a white fog. Liv's flashlight flickered. Then they heard it. A slow, dragging sound from below. Will whispered, "Is someone down there?" No answer. They descended slowly, each step echoing. At the bottom, the passage opened into a wide chamber filled with cracked stone coffins. Strange vines hung from the ceiling, pale and pulsing like veins. In the center of the crypt was a pedestal, and atop it, encased in glass and chained to the stone, was a black, heart-shaped crystal pulsing with red light. Will stepped forward, but Liv grabbed his arm. Look, the ground was covered in bone fragments, human, animal, and others, unidentifiable. They were arranged in spirals, in symbols. Someone, or something, had been here recently. A whisper passed through the room. Will turned slowly toward the nearest coffin. It was open, empty, and then a voice echoed in the chamber, low and layered like several mouths speaking as one. "You took my vessel. You brought me back, half-gorn. Now I will finish what was started." From the shadows, something moved. Will held the old wooden totem in his hands, its strange symbols now glowing faintly in the firelight. Abdil stood next to him, whispering prayers in a language that twisted and snapped like fire through the night air. The rest of the group, Marcy, Liv, and Charlie, watched in a tight semicircle, fear etched deep into every face. The ritual had already begun. The makeshift altar, formed from driftwood, bones, and dark sand, pulsed with something, some buried power that now stirred from its slumber. Abdul had been guiding Will through the motions for hours, preparing his body and mind. Now the final part loomed: invocation. Abdul handed Will a scrap of parchment, weathered and soaked in age, with phrases written in the same sharp, spiked language carved into the totem. "You have to say it exactly," Abdul warned, eyes narrowing. "If you hesitate, if you get even one syllable wrong, it won't be you paying the price." Will nodded once. He looked toward the ocean. In the distance, black waves curled over one another like writhing serpents, and beyond the horizon, he could feel it. The thing they had awoken now watching, waiting. He began to speak. The words cut the air like broken glass. Foreign and foul. They stuck in his throat, making his tongue ache, but he pressed on. Each syllable seemed to shake the ground, drawing something toward them. Suddenly the fire dimmed. Not from wind. There was none. But as if the flame itself was afraid. Then came the first sign. A low groan echoed through the trees behind them, as if the island were exhaling in pain. Charlie grabbed Marcy's arm and Liv back toward the shelter. "Don't stop," Abdul barked. "He's listening now." Will's voice grew louder. The last line twisted like a hook from his throat, and the earth beneath the altar cracked. Out from the split stone and soil, a black mist gushed upward, swirling with small points of light, like dying stars. It enveloped the totem, the altar, and Will, who stood frozen as the air turned ice-cold around him. Then he saw it. Not with his eyes, but with some other sense. A flash, a memory, a bloodline truth. A ruined hall, a stone throne, something massive coiled around it. Sleeping, watching. Its skin was rough, like barnacle-covered rock. Its eyes buried deep inside its skull, closed but twitching. Will wasn't just witnessing it, he was inside it. He gasped, falling to his knees as visions overwhelmed him. People tied to stakes on the beach, chanting in ecstasy as black water swallowed them. His own grandfather, Faith, half mad with salt and faith, performing the ritual a generation ago. And then he saw his mother. She had stood here once too, just as he was, reciting words, offering blood. She hadn't disappeared. She had been taken. Will screamed, but the sound came out wrong, deep, layered, as though something else echoed inside his throat. The mist pulled back. Abdul helped Will stand. The others rushed toward him, but stopped short. Will's eyes were different. The blue had bled into green, the green into black, and the veins on his neck shimmered like fish scales. Marcy whispered, "Will, what happened?" He turned to them slowly, as if unsure of his own body. "I saw him," Will said quietly. "I saw Jarrett." A gust of wind ripped through the camp, blowing out the fire in a single breath, and from the darkness beyond the trees, something answered, a deep guttural noise that shook the branches, somewhere between a groan and a calling. It was not human, not animal, it was ancient. The jungle fell silent. Then, in the distance, they heard footsteps, heavy, wet, getting closer. "We need to run," Charlie whispered. "No," Will said, shaking his head. "It's not after us." "What do you mean?" "It's coming for him." He pointed toward the beach, toward the place where Robert had disappeared. The group turned as one toward the ocean, and there, under the moonlight, a figure was crawling out of the water. It was Robert, or something that used to be him. His body was bloated and torn, with barnacles embedded in his skin, seaweed hanging from his jaw like a beard. One eye was milky white. The other stared straight at Will. He spoke in a voice not his own. "It's time." Will backs away as Robert, now possessed by an ancient force, extends a rotting hand. The beach begins to tremble. Behind them, in the forest, dozens of shadowy shapes begin to emerge, other pilgrims, long dead, answering the call. The ritual was not finished. It had only just begun. Will took a staggering step back. Robert, his friend, was standing before him, or what was left of him. His body sagged like wet driftwood, skin pale and bloated with a bluish tinge. Barnacles clustered along his shoulders and cheeks like a second armored skin. Seaweed dangled from his open shirt, which clung to a torso riddled with lesions and bloated veins. His mouth opened and shut with a slow, deliberate rhythm, as though trying to speak through centuries of waterlogged silence. But it was the eyes that froze Will. One was missing entirely. The other glowed faintly gold, as if something inside him, something other than Robert, was watching. "Robert?" Marcy whispered, clinging to Liz. "Is that really him?" Will didn't answer. He couldn't, because Robert wasn't alone. The ocean behind him began to bubble, churn, and hiss. One by one, silhouettes emerged, half men, half corpses. Each bore signs of a violent end: broken limbs, skulls caved in, rib cages torn open. But they moved. Some dragged their feet, others glided eerily just above the sand. Dozens, maybe more, all heading for shore. Abdul whispered a single word. "The drowned ones." He reached for the satchel at his side, retrieving a small bundle of sage, salt, and iron. "They've answered the call. The ritual has opened the gate." Will gritted his teeth. "I didn't finish the ritual." Abdul didn't meet his eyes. "You didn't have to." The fog from the trees swelled outward, meeting the mist from the ocean, creating a corridor of haze. Somewhere in the middle, the air shifted, colder, heavier. Something moved beyond sight, a shape too vast to name, circling above them like a storm cloud waiting to drop. "We need to get back to the cave," Will said, voice sharp. "But, Robert?" Liv cried. "He's still—" "No," Will said. "That's not Robert." Robert's body cocked its head unnaturally, his mouth twisted into a grin that split too far across his cheeks. "I am the tide," the voice rasped, a deep tone layered with other voices, male, female, inhuman. "I am the memory of the drowned, the blood that calls, the pact fulfilled." Will felt a fire burn up his spine. The symbols from the totem, those he'd chanted in the clearing, flashed through his mind. He understood now. The ritual wasn't about protection. It was about transmission. A vessel, a bridge, and he was the bridge. Robert took a step forward, dragging a foot that left a trail of seawater and black sand. Abdul lit the sage bundle, smoke curling in thin arcs. "Salt lines, iron, form a circle now." The group scrambled back. Marcy and Charlie worked quickly to pour salt in a broken loop around their camp, while Abdul whispered something in a language not meant for human tongues. The moment the circle closed, the air shifted. The fog rolled back. Robert's body stopped at the edge of the salt, twitching like an insect pressing against glass. A scream erupted. From the forest. Will turned. Figures were moving among the trees now, not just from the water, but from the land. Figures in old clothes, Civil War jackets, pioneer dresses, tattered uniforms from other centuries. Their mouths were sewn shut, their eyes bled shadows, and their arms hung at their sides like puppets waiting for a string. "They're the others," Abdul whispered. "All the ones taken before, all the ones who never made it back." Liv gasped. That's the woman in the photo, from the museum, the one with the journal." "She was one of the first," Will said hoarsely. "The first vessel." The air grew tighter, like the sky itself was holding its breath, and then a single name echoed across the clearing. "William." The voice came from everywhere, from the ocean, the trees, the air between atoms. It was his mother's voice, but older, cold, echoing with a sadness that turned to hunger. Will stumbled forward, eyes wide. "Mom?" The wind howled, a low growl rose from beneath the ground. The trees cracked, bending inward like they were bowing. The salt circle trembled. Robert smiled wider, jaw dislocating. He lifted an arm and pointed. "Your blood opens the gate." Will's hand burned. He looked down. The totem Abdul had given him was glowing, and red symbols pulsed along his veins, crawling up his forearm like vines. "It's choosing," Abdul muttered. "The bloodline. It's waking up inside you." Will screamed as pain lanced through his chest. Images flooded his mind, his mother chanting on the beach, the creature rising from the sea, his own face reflected in dark water, shifting, warping. "I'm not ready," he yelled, but the ground didn't care. A massive tremor rocked the jungle, and then it split open. A hole tore through the sand in the center of the clearing. Not a cave, not a pit, a throat, lined with black rock and writhing flesh. The air reeked of salt, decay, and centuries of drowned breath. The drowned ones began to chant, their mouths no longer human, their song wet, broken, and echoing with something beneath. Marcy screamed, "Will, what do we do?" Will staggered to his feet, the totem clutched in his hand, veins black, eyes glowing. He looked at them, his friends. Then he looked at the pit. "I go down," he said, "alone." The moment Will stepped into the pit, the world forgot how to breathe. The air collapsed around him like a dying lung, thick with salt and secrets too ancient for memory. The tunnel was not carved by tools, nor formed by erosion. It pulsed, flexed, as if the island itself was alive and inviting him deeper. The walls were slick, glistening with an organic sheen, part rock, part tissue. The light from above faded within seconds, swallowed whole by the unnatural dark. But Will could still see, not with his eyes, not entirely. The totem clenched in his hand was glowing, faint and steady, casting a reddish hue over the descending walls. The deeper he walked, the clearer the symbols became, carved into the passage, burning softly, matching the ones now tattooed across his arm like branded veins. He didn't know what they meant, but they knew him. Above, the wind howled as the island trembled. His friends, Marcy, Liv, Charlie, Abdul, had not followed. He hadn't let them. Whatever lay below, it was tied to him. His blood, his legacy, and maybe his fate. As he walked, a voice whispered from the walls, "The blood has remembered, the pact unforgotten. The seed returns to the sea." Will clenched his jaw. He wasn't going to be afraid. Not anymore. He was done running from nightmares he hadn't chosen. If this thing wanted him, it would have to face him. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. It was impossible to tell how large it was. No light touched the edges, but he could hear it breathing, massive lungs expanding somewhere unseen. A low, wet thud echoed with each heartbeat that wasn't his. And in the center of the chamber, a figure stood. Tall, motionless, drenched in seaweed and bone. Its face was hidden by a mask shaped from driftwood, barnacles, and antlers, worn smooth by time. It spoke with a voice layered from dozens of mouths, some human, some beast. "You've returned, William of the Hollow Root, bearer of the mark, heir of the vessel." Will raised the totem, trying to steady his breath. "I didn't come to serve you," he said. "I came to end this." The mask tilted. "Then you misunderstand your place." Suddenly the chamber was filled with images, not visions, but memories. His mother on the beach, blood trailing from her palm into the surf. His father screaming, dragged into the sea by something with too many limbs. The town elders performing rituals in secret, hiding the truth beneath layers of folklore and lies. He saw the journal pages again, scattered, crumbling, each describing a descendant marked by the sea, marked to return. It was never about survival, it was about succession. "You are the lock," the entity said, "and the key, born to end the exile, born to open the rift." The floor beneath Will pulsed, then cracked open like the skin of a blister. Inside was water, endless, black and swirling. But it wasn't ocean water. It was memory, liquefied time echoing with screams and song long drowned. Shapes moved within it, faces of the lost, of Robert, of others before him. Hands reached up not to drag him down, but to merge. He staggered back. "I won't do this. I won't be your vessel." The mask split, revealing no face, only teeth, like a lamprey, like a god who fed on lineage. "You already are." Will fell to his knees, his body convulsed, blood poured from his nose, ears, eyes. The totem burned in his hand, turning to ash. The sigils on his skin began to glow brighter, no longer symbols of protection, but acceptance, activation. Suddenly, a light burst through the chamber, a golden flare. Abdul. He stood at the mouth of the tunnel, holding a broken relic wrapped in cloth. "I lied," Abdul shouted. "The ritual has a reversal, but it requires sacrifice, and the marked must choose it freely." Will looked up, barely conscious. "What? Sacrifice?" Abdul stepped forward, voice shaking. "Yourself. Your blood must die with you, willingly. Only then can the gate collapse." Will's heart seized. Everything was clear now. His mother hadn't drowned. She'd jumped. She'd ended her bloodline to stop this thing from breaking through. And Will? He'd undone it. He had brought the bloodline back. "Will," Abdul said gently, "you have to decide. End it. Or let it consume everything." Will turned toward the chasm, the god thing still standing above the pool of memory. His hands trembled. His friends were above, fighting for their lives, and he was the gate. He stood slowly and stepped forward. Will stood at the altar of the maw, his chest heaving as the chants swirled around him in a guttural ancient tongue. The elder's voice rang out, weaving through the storm with unholy clarity. All around them, the congregation knelt in soaked robes, faces raised toward the thunder-split sky like fanatics in ecstasy. Behind him, Marcy sobbed into her bound hands, her face mottled with blood and sea ash. Liv lay unconscious near the stone basin, barely breathing, her pulse like a fading echo. Will was no longer just Will. The creature in his veins had awakened. As the elder thrust the obsidian dagger toward him, Will raised his hand, and the elder froze mid-chant. A shockwave of silence rippled outward. The sea halted, the rain paused. Time cracked. "I remember now," Will said, his voice layered, doubled. His own and something deeper, something older. "You made me forget." The elder staggered backward. "You were not meant to return, not meant to survive the metamorphosis." "I didn't," Will whispered. "I became." He turned his gaze to the circle of followers. "Your god is a lie, but I—" He stepped toward the center of the altar, lightning striking in rhythm with his breath. "I am what your god feared." A low, wet gurgle rose from the congregation. Some began to writhe. Others fell flat, faces bursting with horror. The priestess screamed as her skin blistered and her eyes rolled back into her skull. Will's memories cascaded through him. The tide pool as a child, the whispers in the wind that only he could hear, the uncle who wasn't really an uncle but a watcher, the dreams of teeth and salt. His whole life had been a conditioning, a ritual of suppression, but now the bindings were off. He lifted Liv's limp body in his arms and turned to Marcy. "Get up! We have to finish this." Marcy blinked through tears. "Finish what? You're becoming one of them." "No," he said, blood trickling from his eyes. "I'm ending what they started." They carried Liv down the mountain path, guided only by the flickering oil lamps Will forced back to life with a wordless command. The jungle recoiled from them as if in fear, trees parting, branches curling away. The earth beneath their feet trembled. They reached the bone crypt, where Randy had disappeared, and Will shoved open the heavy stone lid. Inside, darkness pulsed like a living thing, and the scent of brine and decay choked the air. "This is where they buried the anchor," he said. "The anchor?" Marcy whispered. "The piece of the old one that makes this island a beacon." He stepped into the crypt, its calling, not just to me, to others. Inside, Liv awoke, moaning softly. Her eyes fluttered, black pools, then green again. "She's still fighting it," Will muttered, "but not for long." The chamber opened wider underground. Ancient murals lined the walls, depicting human sacrifice, the rise of a sea god with 1,000 eyes, and finally the image of a boy with a spiral branded into his chest. "Will, I was born here," he said, "not just brought. Bred. Bred to become a vessel." Marcy looked pale. "Then why help us?" "Because they tried to erase choice from me. That's their flaw." They reached the innermost chamber. At the center, submerged in a pit of salt water, a massive heart, still beating. Black veins extended from it like roots. Around it were the bones of others, past vessels, failed prophets. "I destroy it. I sever the tether," Will said. "And you?" Marcy asked. Will hesitated. "I sever myself too." He placed Liv down beside Marcy. "When I do this, run. Don't stop. Head to the northern reef. There's a boat buried in the sand. Take it." Marcy's hands trembled. "Will, tell the world, or don't. Just don't forget." He stepped into the water. The heart shuddered. The veins lashed out, wrapping around his arms, his chest. The pit roared with voices, not just ancient ones, but his own memories, loved ones, fears, regrets. He heard his mother humming, Randy laughing, Liv crying his name. Then he screamed. A howl that shattered stone. Light poured from his mouth and eyes. His body levitated. The chamber convulsed. Salt water erupted like geysers. Then, silence. The heart stopped. Marcy dragged Liv through the tunnels, ducking falling debris, coughing on smoke and brine. The island was collapsing, literally tearing itself apart. They reached the reef as dawn broke, blood-red and smoky. A boat, old but intact, rocked gently in the shallow surf. Marcy lifted Liv aboard, started the motor. From the cliffs, a final burst of light shot skyward before vanishing into the clouds. 2 weeks later. Oregon coast. Marcy sat alone on the porch of a rundown beach motel, staring at the sea. The radio beside her played static. Then briefly, a voice. A child's laugh. Then silence again. Liv was sleeping inside. Her vitals had stabilized. No more blackouts. No more strange marks on her skin. But every now and then, Marcy swore she saw something spiral-shaped in her eyes. Deep beneath the ocean trench, where the island once stood, something stirs. A heartbeat resumes. Then, a knock at the door of Marcy's motel room. 3 knocks. Rhythmic. Wet. She freezes, turns slowly. Outside the door, a man's silhouette. Tall, familiar. "Marcy?" comes a voice. Not Will's, but close. Too close. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey into the depths of Jared B., where forgotten rituals, blood-stained truths, and ancient horrors refuse to stay buried. This story isn't just about monsters lurking in the shadows. It's about the things we inherit, the choices we're never told we made, and the terrifying idea that sometimes running from our past only brings us back to where it all began. To every listener, viewer, and midnight wanderer who stayed with Will, Marcy, and Liv until the final breath, we're grateful. Your time, your imagination, your fear, they gave life to this tale. And if tonight you hear whispers from the sea or catch the scent of salt and ash in the wind, don't follow it. Some islands were never meant to be found. Stay safe, stay curious, and never trust the tide.